Hi, and welcome back to Just Ask the Question. I'm your host, Brian Karam. Our seventh year on the air. I want to thank everybody who makes this program possible. And today it's a pleasure to have with me Rina Shah. She's a senior advisor for Our Republican Legacy. That's a national initiative to restore core conservative principles and responsible governance to the Republican Party. We've talked to John Danforth, former U.S. Senator, on this program from this organization before. Rina is well, Rina. I'm just going to read your bio here. It's the first time I've ever actually liked one, so I'm just going to read it. A respected geopolitical risk advisor, political commentator, and award-winning social entrepreneur. She brings nearly 2 decades of experience navigating the highest levels of American politics and public policy. She's a native of West Virginia, and daughter of immigrants from Uganda and India. She rose to national prominence in 2016 when she led the Never Trump movement as the first RNC delegate to publicly oppose Donald Trump's nomination. I remember that, actually. That's an act that triggered her removal from the RNC that was later reversed by a legal battle. And in 2020, she founded Republican Women for Biden. That must have been fun. So that's where I want to start with you,
Right.
Rena. And I'll start with our Republican legacy. I don't even know where to start with this. How do you go about bringing the Republican Party back to reality?
Sanity, maybe is sanity as well. I think we
Yes,
can.
sanity would be nice.
I, I, I think a lot about political parties because obviously I've spent a lot of my professional life, if not the entirety of it, like the serious part of it, has been within Congress, has been on congressional campaigns, has been on presidential campaigns. So I've seen the entirety of the arena, and I've seen the quality of people that enter the arena now, and it's lower and lower. You don't see people like Senator Danforth. I mean, he was a once in a
Right.
lifetime statesman that I read about in books growing up, and I thought,
Great. Now
surely
you've just told me how old I am because I know the guy. That's thanks. That's remember Tip O'Neill? I knew him too. That's
an thing to be working on the Hill in that era. Instead, I came to the Hill at a time where it was already getting nasty. And really, the time that I spent on Capitol Hill is when the Tea Party was sort of coming to be. Like I remember the beginning, the day zero of the Tea Party, and thinking, huh, this is something. And so from there to here, it has been an acceleration of insanity. And I think that is why the group, our Republican Legacy, ORL, I'll just keep referring to it as ORL, has stood out to me because it's not like everybody has to agree on the hottest issues of the day. And the hottest issues of the day remain things like abortion, right? When you think of a Republican, you're like, surely they must be pro-life in that they are anti-abortion. Well, guess what? There are a whole lot of people out there like me who kind of funny. I always name check the late Mario Cuomo of New York, the Democrat,
yeah.
because he this fantastic answer on how he felt about it. And he said, basically, I'm paraphrasing, you can be anti abortion for yourself. So pro life for yourself, pro choice for other women. And that's kind of where I've always been. But our Republican legacy is like, look, we all have diverse values on certain issues, but we can agree on these five things essentially: unity. In that a political party you needs to be united about the type of character they put forward, the Constitution, fiscal responsibility, free enterprise, a big one that I love, and then peace through strength. And so you look at kind of the old guard of Republicans, and I hate to keep calling them the old guard, but they're not people that really reflect what we see coming out of Congress or out of the White House today. These are people that actually live that stuff. And so that's why I was really psyched to get with this group because I think we can build that coalition because more often than not, I keep meeting people who say, I'm a Republican too, like,
Right. Right. Well,
oh,
that.
wait, not a,
What?
we can be those things. We can be concerned about the future of the country and give no thought to actually leaving the Republican Party.
You know, but some of the things that you've just outlined are also precepts of those who say, Psst, I'm a Democrat. I mean, there's not a lot
Fair.
of difference.
Fair. This
So,
era created that difference, actually. And I would say so much of the choice to stay in the Republican Party for me has been because I know I'm committed to those values I just talked about, right?
Right.
That strain, that thread with people like, again, the great U.S. Senator Danforth, but also people like Mike Pence, who I've disagreed with on a fair number of social things. But on the fiscal stuff, the fact that we let Republicans sit in Congress and tell us that they are fiscally responsible and that they care about the national debt, and yet they pass mega bills that are pork filled and drive up the national debt to a tune that is unconscionable. So I just think like the era is about picking a side and saying, I'm going to stick with this side. I'm going to make it better because I've created my entire career in on the Republican side. Why should I be the one to leave? I've never
Right.
left.
Well, okay, that's the one that always pisses me off is when people say I'm dedicated to the Republican Party. I'm leaving it, and
Yeah.
because of Donald Trump. So I was always brought up the only way to deal with a bully is to thump him in the nose. You stand your ground, and why would you leave the Republican Party? Why not make him leave the? It's this acquiescence to Donald Trump that I find odd. But before we get to that, because I really want to spend a little bit of time on that, I just want to pick apart one thing that you said about fiscal responsibility and peace through strength. There are those who say that the Republican Party has been manipulated to make sure that they always support even overinflated budgets for defense by that phrase, peace through strength. So when you talk about fiscal responsibility, are you talking about making sure that the Department of Defense, for example, isn't eating up as and we're not paying $900 for screws and stuff like that? I was going to say shit like that. I just said shit like that. Oh well, what the hell?
I that whole $900 screw because that is just like classic tell all about what our federal government does, which is spends our money so irresponsibly. So I went from being somebody that was a fan of Elon Musk to sour on him to a fan again to sour on him. And now I'm a fan again. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but I've given the guy many chances. In all those chances, he's shown that he's somebody that in part has gotten lucky. People are like, no, he's a guy that goes in and is trusted to clean up and make these companies like powerhouses on the international scale. Okay, to some degree that's slightly fair, but you know what? I that can all be debated, is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
Elon Musk and his business record can be debated. His genius can be debated or lack of. But one thing he got right was talking about how the federal government spends in a way that is mind bogglingly stupid. And I don't like to use such a word that is like just reductive about things. But yeah, when you have federal government spending levels on contractors that essentially supply what could be the basics of something at numbers that just don't make sense in the regular market, then you know we've got a problem. So I like that he called attention to it. I like Doge. I thought on its face, Doge seemed right and nice. That's a highly unpopular view in the area I live in, Washington, D.C., where people have made millions off the backs of the federal government and have done very little to get there, right? But that it tells us that if we're going to apply that principle of reining in federal government spending, really with a fine tooth comb going in and saying that's irresponsible, then that should apply to the Department of Defense.
Okay.
Who's I think gutsy enough to do that? I thought it was Elon. Obviously, he's out now. Doge is more of a concept than an actual action. What they were able to actually propose and do was not really that much, but it was a starting place. And I think there's
Well,
an
I
area.
think the only argument against you're going to have against that is that Doge was. It's a nice. I agree. It's a nice idea, but when you're cutting funds to like NOAA and the National Weather Service at a time when we're going through what we're going through, and then you discuss cutting FEMA, and then you turn around and go, "Hey, we need FEMA."
Yeah.
Maybe there needs to be an assessment of what is necessary for the federal government and what is overkill. Does that make sense to you?
Complete sense to me because I don't even see that conversation being had properly. And
I don't see
and
it being had at all.
I mean, people campaign on that, right? To get here.
Right.
And when they get here, what they realize is the system is a system set up to for most of them to fail, because number one, they're spending most of their time dialing for dollars, and then some of them, especially those who come from the left, really start to understand what the American military industrial complex is, and that's what makes it so hard to really talk about the Department of Defense in a responsible way. For me, peace through strength is different things. It's making sure that we have coalitions and allies when we need them, that we're supplying weaponry in a way that, again, is responsible, making sales that benefit us, that help countries that need to protect themselves. But it gets really murky when you're talking about who's pulling the puppet strings. I mean, I'm a millennial. I've been, I've got some crazy views in the post 9/11 era, right? About just like how we do things. But I think we need a starting place, and we need a responsible conversation about what is fiscal responsibility and free enterprise, and how does that apply to all levels of government. We can do that. And
Well,
I
yes, we can.
do.
We're not. But so before we talk a little bit about the war in the Middle East and and Epstein and those two things that you've kind of alluded to in this conversation, let's talk a little bit about other. I want to revisit what we just spoke about the Republican Party. There are those who have left, like Adam Kinzinger and let's see. Oh, Joe Walsh. Joe Walsh was a Tea Party member. Now he's a Democrat. Do you have hopes of ever getting any of those people back to the Republican Party? Do you think or do you think to hell with them, let them go?
I mean, in on the one hand, I think don't let the door hit you on the way out, because to me it's
Oh, you
cowardice.
grew up in my family, did you? Don't let the door hit in your ass on the way out, pal. Thanks for playing. See you next time. Yeah.
Right. A little bit of it is giving up, because to stay in and fight for reform, to stay in and fight for what you believe in, is a far harder endeavor. I've been doing it for 9 years now. When I spoke out 2016, I was a Rubio delegate to the convention. Nobody had my back, and I'd been a real foot soldier in the party. I'd worked for two Republican members of Congress at that point. I was making my way up through the party leadership. I was on the party executive committee. I was building websites for free for like national committeemen and women, even though I was a paid political consultant, like I was doing everything right. And I still saw people dog me for some just simply stepping out of line. So I'm not one of those people that's like, stay in line. I'm just saying, fight for what you believe in. I know I'm not a Democrat. Why would I ever leave and be a Democrat? If anything, I'm more independently minded, like the vast majority of Americans.
So what's wrong with the Democratic Party? Why aren't you a Democrat?
In general, I would say it's just a view on spending. I just think it's the fiscal piece for me that's everything, but it's also the sense of victimhood. And maybe that comes from being a daughter of immigrants. My late dad was a polio survivor as well, and wouldn't even get the handicap, placard for his cars. But would always say to me, America is such a great country, because look at that ramp over there. Look at that handrail over there. It shows we care. And in places like India or in various countries throughout the African continent, you just wouldn't find that for people like my dad. In fact, a few of his late uncles would tell him, just stay home. You'll never be anything but a shopkeeper. We were merchants in Africa, we in Uganda, and we lost it all through the dictator Idi Amin. We lost 3 generations of wealth. And my dad, because his left leg was shorter than his right leg after he contracted polio at the age of 3, no access to the vaccine. He
What, you
thought,
mean you believe in vaccines? How could you
I'm
be a Republican?
not going to be okay on that bit. Although I will say I like Maha a little bit.
Yeah.
It's anti-vaxxing stuff that kills it for me, because I'm like, my life would have been very different had my dad had access to the polio vaccine.
Yeah.
He'll be with us today. He would have only been 80 and led a pretty healthy lifestyle. He became a general surgeon. He actually went on to go to medical school and come to Duke University in North Carolina and become a trauma and oncology surgeon. And always sold it America to me and talked to me about America as a concept, that we are the kind of place where anything's possible, where they told him he would be nothing because of a physical disability, and he went on to do 8-hour surgeries on minors in southern West Virginia.
So I hear a lot of crossover between what you say and what even moderate Democrats say. So here we sit in This is like the 180th day of the second Donald Trump administration. You opposed Donald Trump in 2016. Uh, and here he is avoiding the Jeffrey Epstein thing, screwing up. He can't say one thing 1 minute without saying the opposite thing the next minute. If you and I firmly believe, having covered both administrations, that if you believe that Joe Biden slid into senility, I think Donald Trump's taken the ice water plunge into the deep end with it. He's not the same guy he was in the first administration at all. But that aside, here we've kind of skirted around it. Let's talk about the Epstein issue if we can for a second. He tells us to ignore it, and he keeps talking about it. And every time he opens his mouth, it's not going away because he lets out a little bit more information about about what happened, including the day before yesterday in a presidential gaggle on Air Force One. Rob Crilly, I think from the Guardian, was there and asked him the question, and there were others who asked him, and he basically came out and said that he referred to Virginia Guffrey working for him, and then saying that Epstein stole her, and that they took it, they acted like she was a piece of furniture rather than the fact that she had quit, and that was frustrating. But it's his. Do you see this issue going away? Do you think it bodes well or poor for the Republic? And I'll start with that.
I think that is a brilliant question, because what does this mean for the country when the
Well, I
president?
try brilliant questions every once in a while. Thank you. I didn't even pay her for that. Go ahead, Rena. Sorry. Listen.
Because I watched you back in the day ask those hard questions, and the hard questions are hard because they require truth, they require transparency, and they require trust too, right? And if you
Yes.
look at truth, transparency, and trust, the three T's as a trio, that is actually what Trump has benefit from both times he's run.
Yeah.
Uh, in the three times, sorry, he's run now, but the first time, the second time in which he's been successful, that's what he's benefit from, because people are like, this guy's so real. He just tells you what's on his mind. There's no sugarcoating, for example. There's no, oh, the complexities of Washington. Feel like Obama, for example, that was like this orator in chief that was like, if you don't understand this really big concept, you're not as smart as me. And by the way, I'm smarter than you, and so I should lead you, right? Whereas with Trump, it went the other way. It's like, I'm going to say what you're thinking, and what you're thinking, that thought was in the back of your mind. I'm willing to bring it to the fore with this whole Epstein Maxwell fiasco that is not going away anytime soon. It is obvious to me that he doesn't want to be truthful. He doesn't want to be transparent. And he's lost the trust of the people who put him there this time. Independents, even, that were kind of
Yeah.
like, maybe with Biden and that disastrous debate, there have been a whole host of lies the Democrats have been telling us. Now that's a separate conversation, right? But
Right.
it was about this sense of like, sure, let's take a chance on this fool again. Because what's the worst? We know him from term one. There's no more pandemic. Let's try him on again for size. And this time, the size just doesn't fit. For days now, they've been trying on different arguments. They've been trying to say, there's nothing there. It's boring. Oh, okay, so there's no list. And I'm somebody that knows there's no actual like black book with a real list. Or so that I know. I know there's an affidavit filled with names of men,
And there's
largely
files. There's investigative files.
files, but this affidavit that lists names, right? They're names that victims gave of, hey, I saw that guy. So Prince Andrew, for example, right? Saw that guy. So he gets named. I think that Trump, all he had to do on this was to come out and say, of course I'm pictured with the guy. I knew him for years. I partied with him like you party with your friends. Did I know he was a monster who was doing this to young women? I'm a father of young women. I'm now a grandfather of Tiffany's, youngest, who's, I think, a newborn at this point. I'm somebody who cares about young women. And I didn't know my former friend who's now
But
dead,
he
who was
didn't do that. Well, and you
saying on a messaging front, that's
right.
all he had to
That's
do.
I agree.
Stupid.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's all he had to do, but he couldn't do it. And what comes out in drips and dribbles is eventually the worst. If this is the worst, then then he knew who Jeffrey Epstein was. He knew what happened to Virginia Giuffre, and he did nothing about it. That's what angers a lot. And to your point, he lost, the Moose Lodge guy, the QAnon shaman, the guy who came in dressed like a Flintstone, like he went to the Moose Lodge in the Flintstones when he stormed the
Yeah.
Bastille, and Donald Trump pardoned him. And then 6 months later, he's calling Trump a fraud. I think, and this is goes back to what you are trying to do with the Republican Party. The reason why people voted for Donald Trump, at least a lot of the MAGA members that I talked to, is exactly what you said. They believed that he was speaking truth to power. He was the guy who was going to come in, and he said he'd be transparent and he'd clean up the swamp, and he hasn't kept his word. And the reason why this issue appears different to me, anyway, just observing it as a reporter, is that both the left and the right are saying the same thing. Just release the information. We don't care who's guilty,
Yeah.
whether it be a Republican or a Democrat. Now, the Republicans think there are mostly Democrats in the list, and the Democrats think there are mostly Republicans in the list. But nonetheless, both of them are saying the exact same thing, and this Donald Trump cannot avoid. So at the end of the day, I think he's completely misread the room. And, I know what Stormy Daniels said, and I also know what South Park said about his endowments, but I'm just going to say that no matter how short it may or may not be, he always manages to step on it. And in this case, I think he's really stepped on it bad. Does he come back from this? Do you think he can come back from this?
No, I think this is actually the pivot point potentially. This might be the beginning of the undoing. But so be it, because a big part of why I joined this group, our Republican legacy, versus other groups, is that you've got all these men of character and women. We've got Congresswoman Barbara Comstock in our ranks as well, and some other good women that have served. And these people say we can't even believe we as conservatives let this kind of talk dominate policy discussions. It's thrown everything out of the news cycle, in essence, like trade deals. I've tried to talk about things responsibly because it's my day job. I'm a geopolitical risk. I really quite love foreign affairs. Over time, I've started to realize, like, the world is interconnected. We Americans need to understand how our actions impact the world and how the world's
We
actions.
can't stick our head in the sand.
And right now, what we're doing is we're showing the world that we're not a serious country by continuing to let our top office holder be just entangled in a conversation that doesn't just speak to the underbelly of society. Brian, you and I both know we're parents, obviously, but I love a good party. My late dad used to say, "There's not a party you wouldn't love, dear." I'm really worried about you because you loved to crisscross from New York to LA. I said, "Dad, that's the
I'll
American
buy the
dream."
first drink. First round's on me. Let's go.
I don't a cocktail, I'll tell you that. But I will say I've been around the culture. I'm a former dancer, hip hop choreographer. I think this is the first podcast I've ever revealed. I went to Diddy parties. I did not know freak offs were
You
happening.
did. Well, you know what Dave Chappelle said about that, right? He said, I knew Diddy. I went to his parties, and I didn't go to the freak offs. And then he goes, huh, I must be ugly.
Invited. But I would say culture. No, I mean, there's horrible, those freak offs, whatever happened in that party culture. We all know that party culture always has a dark side. And there are elite, wealthy people who get wrapped up in all that. But it is a dream to be free as an American woman and decide, sort of find yourself in places you've never been. I think I got into the dance hip hop culture because, again, dance was important to me. I was very interested in music videos at the time of MTV was dominating my youth. It felt like being part of that culture felt like belonging, right? But
Yes,
then,
that's what
yeah,
rock and roll is. I play in a rock band. I understand. I got you.
I, I think this is important to talk about very openly and plainly. It's okay to love a good party. It's okay to want to gather with people who love the same music as you and the vibe and all that. But what happened, and this is the strain between the Epstein and the Diddy stuff that's all coming out now, is that innocent girls from really, like, really poor, advantage backgrounds. Like I'm talking trailer parks, right? Like
Yeah.
take these jobs as towel attendants at a resort like Mar-a-Lago so that they could have access to what the good life was. And maybe they would meet somebody and be like, hey, I know somebody, and they'd get into, University of Florida or wherever. I went to my state school. I ran into girls that had come from the Holler in West Virginia, and they were just happy to be there, who come from good places all across the country. It just takes one bad action by one bad actor to have your life ruined and upended. And that's what's been lost in all this, Brian. It's like the innocent girls that were trafficked by these monsters, Epstein and Maxwell. And he's talking about Maxwell like she's just a normal woman who's in prison for Lord knows what.
Well, yeah. All right. So that's the other thing that both sides agree upon. It's that what Donald Trump doesn't get. Well, first of all, Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell, is a convicted trafficker and predator who engaged in the effort. So on the left and the right, you have people who are saying you don't get it. We do not want to give a pardon to a woman who is a known trafficker, a
Yep.
predator, and aided and abetted the worst human trafficker of young women since the Emancipation Proclamation became the law of the land. He has enslaved young girls. She recruited them and kidnapped them. And now there's talking, she demanded clemency before she would testify. And wisely, Comer from my home state of Kentucky said, "To hell with that. We're not doing it." We'll
Protestant
probably
parade.
get the Fifth Amendment a lot when they interview her, but she's going to stay in prison. And Donald Trump, the idea of pardoning her to save his face, I think he doesn't understand the fallout, the deep bad fallout that occur among the people who support him.
And that is the problem, is that he's trying to define the Republican Party by, saying that I'm the strong leader that can get things done. These first 6 months, I mean,
And
they
he
wanted,
hasn't done anything.
well, on the one hand, I will say this. They could say they've had a legislative grand slam with this big, beautiful bill, which was a mess, by the way.
It
I was
still is. One big beautiful law now is one big beautiful piece of shit, but go ahead.
the one big beautiful bill act, or whatever it turned into law now, is just a piece of junk, because it just shows how swampy that Trump and his ilk have become. I mean, so many of us who've even been, look, I haven't, in retrospect, if you look at things, I look at my career on Capitol Hill, and like I told you, I started there when the Tea Party came to be. When I look at sort of the arc of the Republican Party, we've become part of the problem, allowing these pork filled mega bills to become just normal as to how we govern. Like, why can't we push back and say, let's split it up and let's take time? But he wanted to show the American public he's action oriented, he's a doer. And in this, I think, and look, I come from a culture that values our elders, that values age. So I don't mean to sound ageist, but people are staying in Congress to get richer. We know that.
And
They're
far too long.
stock trading for themselves. The longer they stay, the richer they get. Their net worth goes up. The more powerful people they meet, the better off American they can die as, with a flag draped on the coffin, right? It is such a mess, because what it has done is allowed Trump to have this massive cognitive dissonance, right? He is no longer part of the right wing punditry class that put him in power the second time.
Right.
He's no longer even representing their values, because these people are all saying what I'm saying. They're saying, stop letting this characterize the day. Be transparent the way you said you would be. Show the swamp what's up and reveal what's in the files. No redactions, no excuses, because guess what? Justice needs to come to the fore, and it's been missing because of the lack of accountability and transparency. And I don't know how he digs himself out of this. I think this is just his age related. He's not able to see it anymore.
No, he's just part of the oligarchs.
Yeah. It's
Well,
it's it's a sick moment. It really is. Like,
well,
if I could say that as a young person that just spent the last few minutes talking about partying and having a good time, surely he, in the twilight of his life, can see how badly he's screwing it up when there's numerous pictures of him and Epstein Maxwell.
yeah, but he also is the one who came on came on Air Force One and said that basically that she worked in the spa, and it's a great spa. It's a world best spa. And oh, by the way, when she left, she never said anything bad about us. So not a word. So all Donald Trump wanted us to understand is that he has a world class spa at Mar-a-Lago, and he didn't have anything to do with abusing her. And he completely skips over the idea that he treated her like a piece of furniture. I mean, he still referred to her as stolen, as if she were a piece of furniture, and that she left.
from the
Yeah,
spa.
yeah,
That's the big thing was, oh, Epstein started poaching our spa employees. First time he did it, I told him to knock it off. Then when he did it again, I told him to get out.
get
That
out of here.
that was so weird. Come on now.
Yeah,
No,
no, well, and he didn't act like she was an employee that quit and got a better job. He acted like she was a kidnapped piece of furniture or a stolen piece of furniture. So that bothers me. But I want to get to the part we had talked about earlier, foreign affairs. All right, so he
yeah,
has promised 90 deals in 90 days, and he just came back from the EU, and he has a framework for a deal, not a real deal. I'll always keep telling us that he's got these real deals, but they haven't occurred. But so that aside, internationally, you talked about how people think that we're not a serious nation. That's what I want to ask you about. Where has he failed? Because a lot of people do not, hell, there are people I know that have never left their home state, much less their
yeah.
home county, to see how he's looked at internationally. And there was a great headline in Glasgow when he went to Scotland that said convicted felon visits, Scotland. He's not viewed as MAGA views him, or even as he's not taken seriously by the rest of the world, is he?
Well, Brian, this is one place where maybe I have some disagreement with you because, right, like convicted
Okay.
felon, what we see is some disagreement with just sort of what I heard him in terms of like what people value, right? Like they know he's a convicted felon, but what we saw is that like after all these convictions, even some independents were starting to say it feels like this is politically motivated, right? And there was I disagree. I think you
Yeah,
do you
I
did the
agree with that. No, I don't. But I'm talking about internationally. Do you?
yeah.
How is he? You had said that they don't view our country as a serious country anymore because of Donald Trump. So,
So on the one hand, I think this saga is showing us that not serious because it's just dominated so much other coverage that matters, right? That are like kitchen table issues, like the price of daily commodities. My grocery bill is still super high. How come we don't hear real talk on that? I mean, there are numerous non-naturalized U.S. citizens living within our borders, working here, contributing to our economy, hoping to become citizens one day, by the way.
yeah,
My husband's cousin just got on a plane 2 days ago and gave us a farewell message after being an MBA student here at the reputed Georgetown University, came from India, had great enough scores to get into Georgetown on a full-time MBA, got a job offer, but couldn't get a way to remain legal and stay in the US. So stayed until his visa ran out and none of his employers could keep him. So guess where he got on a plane to the other day? Toronto. This is a good kid, by the way, 28 years old, making a really good salary, living right here in the heart of the DC area, contributing to the local economy, wanted to stay, but cannot. Our immigration system is so broken. So I think there are a lot of people that kind of say, man, you Americans have such a beautiful country. You have capitalism. Free markets that are reigning the day here. You guys are screwing it up by letting this unseriousness like dominate your minds because it's sensational, right? So on the one hand, I think there are a lot of international people who look at his convictions, right? The fact that he is a convicted felon, but he is our president who won in a free and fair election, and say maybe he was wrongfully kind of convicted and
uh,
whatnot. And they kind of flip it in their head also, or they take it a step further. Sorry, what they take it a step further and say is, oh, he owns these resorts. Where he visited in Glasgow, that's his resort. That's his club.
yes. He
So
didn't go over there for diplomacy. He went over there making money.
yeah, yeah. But foreigners, what a lot of them love also is that ability that he became this rich American businessman who has these these great resorts around the country and around the world. That's what they sort of think. But the part in which I think he loses folks is this sexual drama whether it was Stormy back in the day to Epstein crap now, it is making us look weak because it's distracting from the big stuff. So that's kind of, it's a very complicated way of saying, I think by and large, the world still envies us. By and large, I think the world still thinks America is great and didn't need to
Yes,
get,
but he's not.
but Trump. And so that's why I wanted to get with this org of like I said, Danforth, Pence, Comstock, the names of people who I'm lucky to know and very much like. I have some differences, like I said, with former Vice President Mike Pence, but I really respected that he came out week before last, sat there on CBS News, and said, these files need to be released. They need to be open. We need to see what's in them. Because you know what? That's the mark of a good statesman that says, I don't care if it hurts my party.
Yeah,
I care.
that's a mark of an American. That's
Yeah,
a citizens of America who we used
care.
to disagree. Yeah, we would disagree. I may disagree with what you say, but we'll defend to death your right to say it. But we all agree
Yeah.
that we were in the same boat, rowing towards democracy. Now, however, and the ideals of the American Republic as stated in our Constitution. We may disagree on some of the minutia, but we all agreed where we were going, and that's why it gave me pause for relief that there's someone still in the Republican Party saying that. The
Yeah.
Democrats say it all the time, but
So talking about the core values, right? And
right.
that boils down to, like, you can have your differences with people. You can say, okay, what was the Republican Party like from Lincoln to Reagan? And do we
Well,
want to go back?
Lincoln had a pathway. I'm sorry, Reagan had a pathway to citizenship. Trump has a path to Venezuela
Go back?
and a concentration camp in Alligator Alcatraz. One or the other. Look, I want to before you go. There's one last question I got to. And look, I could do this all day. You're great to talk to. I appreciate you being here. The last question I have to ask you about is, and we mentioned it earlier, South Park. What'd you think of the satire on South Park?
God, what can I say? I grew up in the era of South Park dominating our watches, so I don't know that I can say something that's like
Go
politically correct,
ahead.
that I won't regret my kids will
Oh,
hear and be like, "Oh man, mom, that was rough." I think South Park has been spot on in every way, and I just think more of us need to watch it because we need more levity, we all need more positivity. And guess what? There's an election coming if you look over the horizon, there's an election coming up in 2028. I don't think Trump's going to be on the ballot, so keep watching South Park, have a laugh, and
well, I'm not so sure that Trump won't try to be on the ballot in 2028. And there is another one in about 450 days from now in 2026 that'll be key. But for South Park, I'll just say, look, people who say they were shocked, I just want to remind them that that's not the first time South Park has had Jesus or Satan in their in their show, and it's not even the first time they had Satan in a gay relationship with a head of state in his bed. So that's not new. But the part that I loved was the PSA at the end. Donald Trump as a messiah. He walked through the desert for us. And at the same time, completely naked, the emperor has no clothes, and his Stormy Daniels spoke up and said, I'm I'm Donald Trump, and I believe in this message. I was like, that one had me floored. So I always tip the cap to them for that. I thought, and I'll tell you the thing, Rena, that the serious part, I thought I was a badass standing up to him, and I would give him grief whenever possible. And he tried to take away my press pass, and he didn't. And I'll stand there to this day. I'll give him shit. I'll ask him a question. But South Park dared him to sue them, and he has not said one word about them. While he's
South
gone after Harvard, he's gone after CBS, he's gone after the New York Times, but South Park, he's left alone. And I think if anyone takes anything from that, it's that if you want to stand up to Donald Trump, stand up to the bully and expose his shortcomings.
I couldn't have said it better myself. I mean, what better note we can end on by just saying South Park gets it right time and time again. Tells us that how foolish are we to get wrapped up in a person and a personality over the actual stuff that matters, which are
Yeah.
policies in our daily lives, man. So I just my hat's off to you because I've been watching you a long time,
Well,
whether
thanks.
able way back then, and I just think having a good personality, and what I mean by good is just be strong, be and unabashed in wanting to call out the craziness of this era.
Well,
So
bullshit. That's my Middle Eastern upbringing. We don't take no shit. That's
I love that. That's great.
well, Rena. I want to thank you for being here. It's been a pleasure. I'd love to have you come back.
I would love that, Brian. Thank you.
All righty.
So
Well, thanks. And this is just. Is there anything you want to plug before we take off?
I'm just follow me on the socials. I'm Rena in DC, have been for a long time, and then obviously give our Republican Legacy a follow as well. You can just head over to our website, ourrepublicanlegacy.com, and get our socials there. It's a good crew, and we hope to grow. We've got some state chairs, and really, it's a growing group of people. I mean, there's a lot of people out there who will tell you they feel politically homeless, and some of them who are independents in the era of Trump come over and see our website. They're like, I like that. So we just hope to get more people under the banner and get ready for more serious Republican candidates in the future. We need a healthy Republican Party, not one that's just alive like it is right now.
And barely at that. But then again, the Democrats are barely a lot. Don't get me started. Anyway, so I want to thank you for joining us. This is Just Ask the Question. I am your host, Brian Karam. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.